Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking with Microsoft MVP solution architect and educator Neil Benson. He returned to the podcast to chat about solution design, project teams, life in the Microsoft Partner Channel, and the relatively new software company that he has helped launch called Superware. This conversation is a nice follow-up to our past episode, and we also look at some of Neil's latest training and online course milestones. All right. Well, Neil, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you here again. Really looking forward to getting a bit of an update on what you're doing and talk about some of the latest stuff that's going on.
Jason, it's great to be back with you. I think it's been almost a couple of years since I was on the show, and I've been an avid listener, a long-time listener. So great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, for sure. I know you've been super busy since we last talked, and I in looking back at our last podcast episode and some of the things that you have going on now, there's actually some really interesting continuity there because we were talking about some projects that you had been heavily involved in, and that has now, as I understand it, you can tell me, but that's now led to sort of the formation of a new business really focused on some of the same capabilities, the same principles, the same work that you were doing. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So back then I was working with the Royal Automobile Club of Queensland. They are a kind of diversified financial services organization serving motorists primarily in Queensland, which is a state of about 4.5 million people here in Australia. And they provide roadside assistance, insurance, and banking. And I had been leading a team of about 25 developers over the course of about 3 years, deploying Dynamics CRM in their contact center and a CPQ product. And there's lots of integration and telephony, big program of work. And out of that program, out of the people that I was working with, some of us really wanted to continue working together. So we took some of the ideas of what we'd built for RACQ, these contact center features, and some of the data models that we had built, and thought, well, who else needs an application like this? There are only 6 big car clubs in Australia, 1 in each state, and 3 of them already use Dynamics 365. So that's a pretty limited industry vertical. But here in Australia, we've got something called superannuation, which is a retirement account. So your employer pays into a retirement account on your behalf, and you can access that money when you're 60. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like the 401k system in the US, and there's a similar system in Hong Kong and Singapore and the UK and other jurisdictions as well. In Australia, we call that superannuation. Well, there are member-based organizations with hundreds of thousands or millions of members. They have very long customer lifespans, and they have to manage diversified financial services. So they've got investments and insurance typically in there as well. And there's a lot of consolidation going on in that industry at the moment, which is throwing up lots of technical or technology strategy decisions, which CRM system should we go with? And so that was a great opportunity for us, where we've launched Superware as a new Microsoft partner organization into that industry. We've built a CRM application specifically for the superannuation industry. And we're going live with our first couple of customers over the next couple of months.
All right. Very exciting. Yeah, that does sound like, so I'm thinking about what that would take. It sounds like it's probably a fairly highly regulated industry, since it's basically, it sounds like financial services more or less. Is that right?
It is, yeah. It's very highly regulated. And in fact, the regulator is the one forcing some of the change. Mm-hmm. So the Australian regulator recently announced some performance measures and contacting the worst performing funds and saying, hey, you've got to improve your performance for the benefit of your members. Otherwise, we're going to force you out of business. And that's exactly what the regulator has done. They've forced a couple of they're typically smaller funds who haven't got the scale, who haven't got the investment performance, and they're forcing those smaller funds to merge with bigger funds for the benefit of the members.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's throwing up some interesting boardroom conversations in lots of super funds right now.
Yeah, and the the IT challenges of such a change they've got to be one of the big challenges of actually following what the government's telling these superannuations to do. Bringing any mergers complex on the back end systems.
Right, and these are very large organizations, typically with sometimes with millions of members, mm-hmm. and they've got complex transactional systems with members pouring in their retirement savings since superannuation was invented in 1996. That's a lot of investments, These things have got billions of dollars sloshing around in them, and you got to merge all that together. You got to merge websites. You got to merge contact center systems. You got to merge marketing systems, and yeah, it's thrown up some real challenges in the industry.
Yeah. So in your approach at Superware, is it turnkey software? It sounds like it's very complex, and that I imagine these organizations don't have a one size fits all kind of.
Yeah, that's right.
Look.
So there are some slightly different business models within different superannuation funds. So we aren't able to say, hey, here's a completely turnkey CRM application for you. But we've got a suite of features that we can deploy. So if you provide financial advice, for example, to your members, well, we've got a set of features that help you provide financial advice and track the outcomes of that. If you have strong engagement with your employers that are making the contributions, then we've got a suite of features to help you grow and deepen your engagement with employers. And of course, then we've got all the member features that you might need and be able to roll up member accounts and see their holdings and provide them with case management functionality and integrate that with your marketing applications. So they're slightly different for each different super fund. But we're getting them 80% of the way there with pre-built functionality. So it's a nice industry play. And Microsoft's pretty keen that I think a lot more ISVs take that industry-led approach. I'm really excited to see where that goes and how it lands with the Microsoft Cloud for financial services, how we can play in there. And then, of course, we're adopting all the new AI and trying to bring that to bear to help super funds forecast how much members will have at retirement and all those kind of wonderful calculations that we can provide now as well.
Yeah, interesting. That was going to be kind of my next question, was how well can you sort of follow Microsoft's vision and roadmap, I guess, to some extent, when it comes to biz apps, cloud for financial services. Is it lining up for you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we're following hot on their coattails, and in a lot of ways it is lining up. There's some differences and challenges, and not every superannuation fund, and I guess lots of large enterprises are like this. They're not always a complete Microsoft shop front to back. There's always a mixed environment with lots of other vendors playing in there as well. So one of the first super funds we're going live with this May, this is their real first big adoption of business applications, Microsoft business applications. It's their first set of Azure services as well. Prior to this, they used software from other vendors. And so that's a great story for Microsoft, winning a mid-sized customer and bringing them over onto the Microsoft Cloud. But we're having to play nicely with all that other technology that's in there as well. And when it comes to which AI should we use or which customer data platform should we use, it's not a slam dunk for Microsoft. We have to make a good case because this customer knows other vendors pretty well.
Sure. And in this area of work that you're spending so much time on it, and it's exciting that you've gotten so much momentum with it. Are you still able to sort of put your agile expertise and Scrum expertise to work and use that in some of these engagements?
We're really lucky. So I've got Customery and the Customery Academy where I help Microsoft customers and partners adopt an agile approach, and I'm a big fan of Scrum. I've got a course over there that we launched a couple of months ago called Estimating Business Applications. And Superware, I don't know if the guys will appreciate me saying this, but Superware is my test bed. We got two teams working for two customers at the moment, and that's where we run all these experiments about better ways of estimating, better ways of documenting requirements, better ways of collaborating as a team, better ways of coaching our customers. And what I learn in Superware and what I've learned in all the projects I've done in the past gets poured into the training offerings that we've got over at Customery Academy. So, for example, the estimation technique that I use is what Superware used to win both of these customers. We had very short discovery exercises, probably a week or two. We produced a user story map. We estimated that in story points. We predicted our velocity, and we showed the customers a short proposal, like it was half a dozen slides of how much it was going to cost and how long it was going to take. And both of these customers decided to proceed with us. So really just trying to prove out what we teach at the Customer Academy inside the Superware business.
Yeah, and it sounds like other people want to learn this technique too. You were writing about that on your blog recently. I saw that hundreds of hundreds, if not more, people taking various courses. I forget exactly what it was for the estimating, because there's a course specifically about estimating, right? And
I've got an Agile Foundations course that helps business applications folks learn the basics of an Agile approach. That's had a couple of thousand students come through there. That's a free short course. The Scrum course, where we help people prepare for Scrum certification. And that's had about 600 students come through, and a couple of hundred of those have been certified. They're now professional Scrum Masters with scrum.org. And I love celebrating their certification. It's always wonderful to see those pour in every week. And then the estimating course, which we launched in February, has had a couple of hundred people come through that. And there's a free tier, which kind of covers the basics of estimating requirements. And then the kind of more advanced tier, which covers estimating entire projects and then how to estimate and pitch your estimates in a proposal. And one of the common questions I often get asked as well, we're getting asked to do fixed price work or fixed scope or fixed date work. How can we use an agile estimation technique within those constraints? And so we cover that off in the course as well. That's still a pretty popular one. There's a lot of public sector, government organizations, sometimes not-for-profit organizations who have got some fixed price or fixed timeline constraints as well.
That is one of the other interesting things I've been learning about, I guess, in recent months or recent quarters, is changing service engagement models. One that comes to mind that I think I've talked about on the podcast is one that like Steve Mordew, another Microsoft MVP, has used in his business, which is he calls subscription as a service as a subscription.
Service as a subscription.
Yeah, I think that's it. Anyway, it sets out a very a different approach, and I imagine not to speak for him or what his firm exactly is doing, but when you're taking and trying to give your customers predictable pricing and predictable sort of levels of service from the service provider side, that's got to just be critical to be able to do that kind of estimating, even if it's really for your own good in understanding what your customer expects and what you can really deliver, because these models won't change. I mean, they'll keep changing.
I think you're right. I think there's some very traditional models, and some of those are still working, where some partners still love to do very detailed designs up front, and they've analyzed all the requirements, and they estimate every single task, and they lay it all out on a Gantt chart, and then they cost all of that up, and they wrap it into some kind of fixed price engagement. That model is still working. I think it's not as popular as it used to be, and it's waning, but it's great to see organizations like ForceWorks innovate and create some completely different models of working with their customers. I'd say Superware is somewhere in between. We have a known cost per sprint. So a sprint for us is typically a 2-week time box of work. And I know how many members of my team are working on that in that sprint. It's normally, for one team, it's 6 people. For the other team, it's 8 people. And so that's got a fairly predictable cost because I know the cost of each of the resources. And somebody might take some leave for a couple of weeks, so there might be a public holiday, which might change the cost of that particular sprint a little bit. But normally they're very, very predictable cost per sprint. And so we just say to the customer, okay, well, this is, it's $60,000 per sprint, or it's $85,000 per sprint because of the resource mix that we've got. How many sprints do you want to go for? We think it'll take 10 sprints to achieve the outcomes that you told us you're looking for. Does that seem fair? And off we go. And at any point they can say, yep, we've got all the value that we wanted. We've achieved all the outcomes that we had set out to achieve, and we're going to wrap it up here. And then we're done. And they've got that very predictable model. Or if they say, hey, look, we've got some other ideas of extra work we'd like to do, some new functionality we'd like to build and deploy, or some new integrations that we need, or we just made an acquisition and we want to roll this out to some more users, we give them an estimate of how many more sprints that will take, and they sign up for that, and off they go. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that this makes me think of is when it comes back to Microsoft's sort of messaging or vision in business apps right now, and especially with Power Platform, but they talk about fusion teams. And for me, thinking about that from your perspective, does that change, or has the nature of sort of the teams that do the development changed with the popularity of Power Platform, or the way that you build applications in the architecture that Microsoft provides? Does it involve more customer workers doing, either development at any level, from UI to to code, to low level coding to high level coding. Is that changing for you?
I don't think it is. I've never had a name for it until Microsoft called it a fusion team. So that's great. I finally know what I'm doing for the last 15 years. Yeah. I've always had customer team members in my teams, whether that's a developer, a business analyst. In an agile team, there's a role called the product owner, which is the customer representative who's giving us the vision for the product and that they're prioritizing the requirements. That person's almost always a customer team member. So we've always had that blend of my resources as a Microsoft partner plus some of the customers' resources. I can't remember the last time I did a project without any customer team members in the blended team. We're not calling it a fusion team, which is great. And long may it last. I think that's absolutely essential. I love it when those customer team members have learned the agile approach as they've worked alongside us. They've learned modern approaches to continuous integration, continuous deployment, and how to professionally and securely deploy applications from development right through into production. And we've done all that knowledge transfer, not at the end of the project, but during the course of the project, which is a much healthier way to do it, I think. And more customers are seeking out Microsoft partners who are willing to work in that fashion with them. I've always done it, and a lot of Microsoft partners have, but more and more customers are demanding it, which is great. And I think that's much better than the traditional, okay, now I'm going to go and hire a system administrator and you're going to do a 2-week knowledge transfer with them and they're going to look after the system once you guys leave. I think that's a pretty old-fashioned way of approaching business applications. I like to think of the business apps that we build not as a project, but as a product. The product lasts well beyond the implementation project, and it's got to be fed and watered and maintained and enhanced even after the Microsoft partner has left the building.
Yeah, I mean that the nature of that has certainly evolved over the years for sure, and different partners take different approaches to it as you're describing. And I think, I think the Power Platform sort of capabilities that customers just get in their hands, in addition to, say, a dynamic solution, it seems to me that it really should be changing the equation of what customers think about as, a partner is sort of wrapping things up on a well-defined project or, some well-defined sprints, and delivering the solutions at the end of it where they go after that, whether they stay engaged with the partner, whether they have people on their team who remain sort of a fusion team of some sort, and they take on some of those responsibilities themselves to extend or adapt from there. I think it should be a different, I guess, outlook than it would have been, even 5 years ago. It's certainly 10 years ago.
I think there's a difference of approach here when, depending on the style of application that we're building. The type of work that I do tends to be enterprise applications, multi-year, multi-people programs, millions or tens of millions of dollars of value. And that requires a level of sophistication and a team approach, which you just don't necessarily need if you're building productivity apps at a team level. So, if you're a sales analyst inside a large organization and you want to move away from using a forecasting spreadsheet and you want to move towards a Power App for doing that. As a citizen developer, you can pick up the tools and learn how to do that. And a lot of those folks are very successful building personal or small team productivity applications, maybe even something for a small department. And I think that is a great capability. It's unlocked with the Power Platform, but trying to scale that up to build a mission critical application, having a team of citizen developers who maybe haven't had the experience of building enterprise class applications. I wouldn't want to see a citizen developer team do that on their own without some folks with a bit more experience behind them, working alongside them in a partnership. So, yeah, I think it depends upon the criticality of the application and the scale of it as to what kind of team approach is going to work. But it's all these models are available to customers today, and it's really interesting to see them choose and Microsoft partners trying to coach them which is the right path to take as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to just double back. I meant to mention to you, I mean, the numbers that you mentioned earlier on sort of the use of some of your courses. I mean, that's really tremendous. Those are thousands of people who've gone through that, and that's pretty cool to hear. Because I think certainly when it comes to the partner channel, the more people who have good project skills and good estimating skills and project management and development skills, the better, right?
I'm
So that's
always
really nice.
wondering, Jason, I don't know if you've got a perspective on this. How many business applications, Microsoft business applications professionals are there worldwide? How many people today are earning a living from working with the Microsoft Power Platform or Dynamics 365? Do you have any idea what the estimate might be?
Offhand, I don't. I don't know. My sense, though, is that it hasn't grown very much. That's sort of the one thing that seems to be with kind of a bit of conventional wisdom is that, there's hiring, but it's really sort of linear growth with sort of a low slope to it, is my sense, but I don't know the number.
I reckon it's probably about 250,000 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking low hundreds of thousands if I was going to guess, but
and most of those are working for a Microsoft partner. I think the people that work for a Microsoft customer who've got some Power Platform skills, I'm not sure if I'd put them in the same category. That they're typically not earning a living building Power Apps or Power BI dashboards and charts, but a lot of them are. They're just much harder to find and include in some kind of census. I'm always interested in what the total size is, and I think it is expanding. I think there's a lot of citizen developers who are learning these things whose skills you find impossible to measure. But I reckon there's probably another 250,000 of those folks as well. So I think the total market's maybe 500,000 people who are spending a lot of their days building business applications on the Power Platform and Dynamics 365.
Interesting. Yeah. I would guess that the real challenge is growing the really sort of the people with the, like you said, the enterprise grade application skills, not just the application, but solution architecture and all the years that go into sort of building up that kind of a career, because those are certainly the hardest to grow, I would say.
I completely agree with you. The number of those people is probably not changing dramatically, and in 5 years' time, hopefully it'll be a bigger cohort. But it's you've got to just let them run some big projects and get some wins under the belt to acquire that experience before you can say, they're a senior developer or they're an architect. Those kind of people can't just go through a boot camp and acquire that expertise very easily.
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft's sort of academic efforts, in universities have done them any favors at this point. As far as I can tell, those have really kind of floundered over the years. I know there are some that still keep going, but it seems like from 10 years ago, they've lost a lot of momentum in that, which is, I think, key to really building up this skill set. And I know partners have worked hard in different regions to do that themselves, which is nice to see. But I mean, I think that's hindered growth. If I was going to,
they did have the Academic Alliance for a while. I think you're right. The results from that were never great. I didn't see a lot of people coming out of those programs. There's a program for veterans, which is pretty small scale, but it's having some success. But I've got to applaud this success. There are some partners who are really stepping up. I think RSM in the US is a great example of a Microsoft partner who has taken it upon themselves, and they take in, I don't know, I want to say hundreds of graduates every year and train them up in business applications. And that's, hats off to them. They're going to have a great skilled workforce in the years to come. So some of the big partners are really picking up the mantle and taking it on themselves to build that workforce where others are just not. So it's great to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's certainly several different stories around that. There's some really interesting stories around Power Platform skill development to Power Apps and Power Automate kind of stuff. Sort of independent of. There's the the Power Platform Academy. I'll look for the exact name, but they're taking people who are either career changers or out of high school even, and getting them trained up on some of this and helping place them in either internships or introductory level roles at partners. So people are definitely making an effort in these areas.
Yeah, there's the business application skilling program that Microsoft is running and trying to scale up. There's organizations like TechFluent in the US, Power Platform School in the UK, and they're doing exactly like you said. They're taking either school leavers or career switchers or parents returning back to the workforce and giving them the skills and particularly the technical skills they need to start a career in business applications, which is amazing to see. And I've had a few of those folks come through Customer Academy because I offer them a scholarship to get them Scrum certified, because part of my mission is to help people start their career with an agile approach and not learn the bad habits maybe of a more traditional approach with upfront design and upfront requirements analysis. I don't want them to go through that pain and misery that I went through in my early career. So we've got a few of those students from those schools coming through the Customer Academy, and I think, even with all the thousands of students that have come through, my point was that it's a massive market of maybe 500,000 folks out there. And so whatever success we're having inside the school, I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg, and plenty more room for other people to come and join us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great to hear. Those resources are so valuable that you can put out there for people like that. And I think, there's sort of the intangible element, like something like Power Platform School, where they're helping sort of make connections where there were none. Like if you don't have an into this industry, I imagine it's very difficult to get started. If you're not sure who to reach out to, or, how to make yourself sort of known in the way that people do when they're building their careers up. I mean, that's, what percentage of your success is determined by that? A significant percentage, Yeah,
I think it is tougher. And I don't think that working from home helps, particularly people in their early career either. So even if you're working for a Microsoft partner or you're working in a customer organization, without that, side by side, day to day, working with somebody with more experience, it's tough to learn some of the softer skills. You can go and get technical training, and Microsoft Learn does a good job of that. There's lots of great partners who do technical training, but you're missing that, day to day absorption of knowledge from people more experienced. And it's harder to pick up, I think, over Teams meetings and remote calls than it used to be when we all worked together in an office. I think it's a brave new world out there for people coming into the Power Platform, but it's some great opportunities, and there's always some wonderful stories about people who have made the transition and are building very rewarding careers on the back of it.
All right. Well, yeah, let's shift gears a bit here, because I think we're talking a little bit about sort of careers and some of the courses that you've done. I mean, how do you feel like it's going in the channel overall? You're an entrepreneur. You've got a couple of going interests here, including a pretty new one still. What's your channel outlook?
So I've come back into the channel really with Superware over the last year or so, and it's a lot harder than I think it used to be. Whenever I got started back in 2006, Microsoft had a big cohort of people called partner account managers, and there was two styles of partner account manager. There was account managers who would recruit new partners into the channel. And once they had got their first couple of people certified or won their first couple of projects, you'd get handed over to somebody who could help nurture and grow your partner organization and help you make all the right connections inside Microsoft. And that style of engaging partners has gone. The Microsoft structure has changed, and those folks in those kind of roles don't exist anymore. And I think I'm finding it's up to me to go and find the right folks inside Microsoft. So we've got an ISV product in the financial services industry, trying to find out who the sellers are for who focus in that industry, trying to find out who the account execs are for the different superannuation funds here in Australia, is just tough. I don't have a directory that I can navigate and figure this stuff out. You just have to keep calling people, chatting to people, and going sideways until you find the right person. And that just seems a lot tougher than it used to be. And then at the same time, the new Microsoft partner program, I think, is a lot harder for new partners to adopt. There's a lot more measures than there used to be, and there's just a lot more complexity in that program. And I've got to wonder whether or not it's actually worth it. How much of my time do I need to invest tracking monthly active users and customer activations and all these different measures, and collecting evidence, providing that evidence to Microsoft, chasing customers to sign things and approve things and confirm things, and for what? It's really tough to say what the tangible benefits are. I don't know if you're hearing that kind of feedback from other Microsoft partners. I know you speak to a lot more than I do, so interested to hear what the rumors are, Jason.
Yeah, you're echoing some of the things I have heard in other cases. I have to say it's a little discouraging when you talk about this, because I mean, kind of the profile that you have, that your business has, where it's super industry focused, super focused on Microsoft technology, and those connections are still a struggle. That does sound like not the greatest feedback or the greatest experience that for other partners to hear about, and it's a little unfortunate. I will say that we're sort of a year right into we're coming up on a year into sort of the latest iteration of Microsoft's partner program. Yeah. And I know that Microsoft does have, I don't know when this is going to exactly come out, but I know Microsoft is sort of going to be updating everybody out there in the world on how things are going and what their outlook is for, I guess the rest of this fiscal year and into next fiscal year, kind of an update before June, right? And so it will be very interesting to hear, because I think you're certainly not the only partner who has shared their honest sort of outlook on how well they think Microsoft is doing their job. So it's certainly not something that they haven't heard.
Yeah. So one of the challenges I faced recently, we've got this mid-market customer. They're working with probably 3 or 4 different Microsoft partners across different workloads. So there's a managed service provider who provides their Office environment, and there's a couple of Azure partners doing a couple of new things in there. There's a data platform partner doing some Power BI work, and there's us doing the business application stuff. And the customer, quite rightly, in my opinion, wants to use one partner for all their Microsoft licensing. So that managed services provider, they're the transacting CSP, the Cloud Solutions Provider, I think the acronym is. And so they ask that one partner to provide all the Microsoft licenses. So as a business applications partner, because I'm not the transacting CSP, I'm not selling the customer any licenses, our involvement in that project is completely invisible to Microsoft. That Office partner who doesn't know anything about business applications is going to get whatever margin is available, is going to get whatever partner points are available, and it's all going to flow to that transacting CSP who hasn't had anything to do with the business apps project. And that's really unfortunate. Microsoft hasn't got the capability to track what partners have been working on which projects, because it all flows through the basis of an invoice. And to be honest, I don't really want to invoice customers for Microsoft licenses. That's not my strong point, and I'd need to build a billing system for that. And that sounds more complicated and expensive than the game I really want to get into. And on the other side, working with an enterprise customer, you've got this notion of a digital partner of record. So you can attach yourself as the partner inside the Microsoft Business Apps subscription. But if there's another partner who comes along and does a little bit of work for that enterprise organization, and that's very common in large enterprises, they're working with more than one Microsoft partner, the second partner can overwrite your digital partner of record details and they get the credit. And then somebody else comes in and they overwrite the second partner and they get the credit. And it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see if they adapt at all. I mean, one of the big messages, I think, a year ago when the latest sort of CSP updates kind of came out was that some of these things would shake out and adjustments would be made by Microsoft to address. Maybe not exactly. I haven't maybe heard exactly those complaints. Although it does sound similar. We've had other podcast episodes where guests have explained some of the same issues and complexities or similar ones. So I mean, getting on a year here, I think coming up on the end of Microsoft's fiscal year, I would expect partners are listening carefully to see how they're going to, if and how they will address some of these concerns, because they sound valid to me.
Well, there are certainly plenty of successful Microsoft partners out there who seem to be enjoying the relationship they have with Microsoft. I think most of those are a fair bit bigger than my startup. So maybe there's a certain scale you need to reach before the Microsoft partnership really pays off. And there are programs like Microsoft for Startups to help you try and get to that scale if you're an ISV building an application. But it's until you get that scale, I think you're kind of on your own, and that's what I'm learning. I spoke to one of my friends in Europe who works for kind of transnational, kind of big regional Microsoft partner, and he's got 4 full-time people whose job it is just to manage the Microsoft partner relationship. So they're tracking all the digital partner record things. They're tracking all the licensing deals and the active usage and the number of customer activations. Four full-time staff just dedicated to pushing all that paper around and checking stuff in the partner dashboard and tallying up numbers. That's just a massive expense for the channel that I think is just has been pushed down to us because of the Microsoft scale. You think they've got hardware partners at one end, Azure partners, and they've got game studios and entertainment partners in the middle, and business applications partners like us on the outside. So it's a huge breadth of different types of partner relationship they're trying to manage through one program, and it's no wonder it's quite complicated compared to maybe another software publisher who just focuses on a single product.
Yeah, and these, I mean, it certainly does seem like the smaller partner firms are the ones that do get kind of the rough end of this. In most cases, like you said, I hear on the Business Central side quite a few of these complaints as well. Especially because, and that's not to go too far into Business Central, but when it comes to smaller clients or at least smaller partners, there's what am I trying to say? The CSPs are really competing in a bunch of different dimensions. They're competing to try to sort of work with more and more partners to sort of have to be the license seller, if you will, and then within industry and within geography, it really ends up being sort of this very dense sort of network of partners who are all sort of competing in the same geography and the same sort of spaces. And it does raise that question. This is something that another Microsoft MVP's raised. How much saturation can you support with this model that Microsoft's trying to lay out there? I don't think there's an answer yet.
No, there's not. It's going to constantly evolve. There's acquisitions and mergers and people starting up new businesses all the time, and that's natural. I think that's healthy for the channel. It's always been like that, and it'll continue to be like that. And what we've got to do is navigate what the appropriate size is for each of us and who the appropriate relationships are. Whether that's with a direct CSP, some of those are now getting into the implementation game. So the direct CSP you relied on as a licensing reseller now might be competing with you for implementation projects. We've got ISVs on the other, and you might recommend an ISV's app, but now the ISVs want to get into the implementation game and deploy that app themselves. So yeah, you just gotta keep on your toes and stay frosty, I think.
What else is new? I mean, I know we have, like, for myself, I'm looking out at a fairly busy conference season coming up this spring for us in the Northern Hemisphere. How about for you?
I'd love to go to more in-person conferences. I'm sitting here in Australia with a lot of jealousy for my friends in North America and Europe who are, conferences are beginning to open up again. There's last year and certainly this year, there's lots of great in-person conferences to go to again. We don't have those yet in Australia. The Microsoft partner conference that we used to have in Australia was wound up a couple of years before COVID, and there's no sign of that coming back. So airfares are still horrendously expensive. I've been invited to Redmond next month for the MVP Summit, but in US dollar terms, it's easily $5,000-$6,000 for an economy return flight. Microsoft didn't give us a lot of notice. Plus, we got to pay for hotels and stuff. So it's a 10 grand out of pocket unexpected expense. So those international travel is still very expensive for a lot of us. So I'm tempted, Jason, to just do something crazy and organize an Australian Power Platform conference here. And if I can't afford to travel, I'll go and host one. But yeah, looking forward to hopefully getting across to the US and to Europe to attend some more conferences in person and catch up with old friends and meet some new friends. There's just nothing quite like it.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, the closest one outside of Australia that I know of is the Directions Asia event this spring, which is in Thailand. So, and that's an SMB partner type of event. I don't know offhand of any others very, very close to. But yeah, I certainly take your point, and very interesting if you do decide to go in that direction, please do keep me updated. I'm always interested as events and happenings, sort of set up and arise from nothing, or built on other things, right? Because often that's how events seem to evolve.
Well, I'd be interested to get your perspective, because I've been canvassing some friends, and I've been involved in quite a few Dynamics 365 Saturday events many years ago, where it was a free one-day community conference, typically on a Saturday, so that people didn't have to take time away from work. And we raised a little bit of sponsorship to cover the cost of the venue and food. Those free conferences have a high dropout rate. It's free, so you haven't paid for a ticket. What does it matter if you don't show up? And so you're doing pretty well if you get 50% attendance. We've got things like Nordic Summit, South Coast Summit, Scottish Summit in Europe, where those free community events are still incredibly popular. And I take my hat off to the people organizing those. They're not professional conference organizers. They're not getting paid. And they're spending weeks and weeks of their personal time organizing these things at great risk to themselves as well, financially, and sometimes as well. But I was speaking to customers who actually don't really enjoy that free community conference model. Customers don't want to give up their weekends like a consultant might do, especially an independent consultant. They would rather pay a couple $100 per day to go along and get some deep dive technical sessions from trainers who are paid to be there, and go to a multi-day event where there's great food, great accommodation, all included, and do a midweek conference. So if I was going to do something, I'm really torn between those two styles. I don't know what you've seen in the US, whether the community model is still vibrant there like it used to be, because it seems like most of the conferences that are coming back are the paid style conferences.
Interesting question. Yeah, they both still carry on. The 365 Saturday to me seems to be sort of the prototype of, like you described, the sort of the free weekend, highly technical typically, or very, very feature function focused events, where there's sort of a lot to consume if you know what you're looking for, and you're willing to take a Saturday to do it in sort of a no frills way. Like in the US, there are definitely a couple of different kinds of events these days, I would say, that are paid, sort of professionally planned. And I think part of it's just the sort of the size and number of people in the US, but so there are sort of like regional training based paid events where they sort of market themselves as come get educated. And some of those kind of exist, in various sort of cities around the US, kind of geographically spread around, from the Southwest to the Northwest to the Midwest, Northeast, everywhere. And those can be quite popular, from what I can tell. They seem to be sustainable in the financial sense that they can keep operating, and they pull in enough sort of trainers and provide a real, like you said, professional experience. So those continue. And then there are also the what I would call more traditional Dynamics kinds of events, that I think of, where it's sort of a mixture of education and product updates, as well as an expo floor with ISVs and some community building as well, and skills and training development. And it's more of a mix, as opposed to a pure training event. And those tend to be, I would say, national events, or, a single once a year kind of an event, as opposed to these training regional events that can happen easily twice a year in multiple cities. And I don't know as much about those sort of regional events personally, but they seem, like I said, to be able to sustain themselves, sometimes with Microsoft's help, I think. But yeah, that's sort of what I see here. And in I'll just throw in one other very quick plug for an event that's coming up in Europe, which is Dynamics Minds, which is a new event, community focused. But again, it's sort of like it's got that sort of annual Dynamics community kind of vibe to it, as opposed to a training event. And it'll be a mix, I think, of customers and partners. I've been involved in the sort of advisory board, not in any business sense, but just in sort of some of the planning. I've been doing a little bit, so I've seen that evolve, and that's happening this spring as well.
Great. I didn't know that was a service you offered. So when I come to do the planning for the Australia Power Platform Conference, I'll rope you in.
Yeah, rope me in.
Awesome.
For whatever it's worth, the
Microsoft Dynamics World Media Partnership. That's what we're looking for.
We do that for sure. I like to, events are great to see what other people are spending their time on. And I was looking going through and seeing the agenda come around for this Dynamics Minds event, which is in Slovenia. And then, the Dynamics Con virtual event that just happened, I get involved in that as well, kind of in the same way, again, just as a sort of media sponsor and some advisory support, along with other people. It's always great to see sort of what people want to present on, because it does sort of evolve over time. And these events do tend to put a premium on selecting sessions that are new and that take on sort of the newest topics.
I think selecting the speakers and selecting the topics for these conferences has become a real fine art. It's funny how some of the different conference organizers do it in slightly different ways. Some have the community voting aspect to it, which is great, but others think that those votes can be easily rigged and gamed. So, different conference organizers approach it in different ways, but they've all got the same challenge of trying to attract a diverse set of speakers, some new, some experienced, some new topics that are cutting edge that maybe people haven't heard so much about, and perennial topics that are always in demand. It's a tough choice, tough gig for an organizer to get exactly the right balance to attract the widest possible audience. Yeah,
you're spot on. It's a bit of an art, and voting alone is not going to. I don't think that's the future, and I don't think it can be all sort of backroom selection either. I think there's going to be a range and different. The nice thing is with different events, they can sort of choose the way they want to do that, and I think as long as there's some clarity on what the process is, it's okay. People sort of vote with their time and their attention, and to which events they choose to go to.
Well, I'm just grateful we live in a world where in-person events are becoming possible again, and the last couple of years are behind us, I hope, touch wood. Looking forward to seeing you and some of the rest of your audience at some of these events coming up over the next
for sure. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrapped up here? I mean, we've kind of covered a lot of ground.
We have covered a lot of ground, Jason. It's been a fascinating conversation. I hope everybody else has enjoyed it as much as I have. And please feel free to reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn if we haven't already connected. And come along, check out some of the programs that we've got at Customer Academy. And if any other ISVs, I want to share some stories about building applications. I'd love to hear more of those. So either get in touch with Jason or myself. And I always love hearing what other entrepreneurs are doing and how they're approaching their market and building their applications. So
keep
sharing those stories.
More entrepreneurship in the business applications channel is certainly a good thing. It's certainly something we could use more of, I think. Great point. And please keep me updated as Superware moves ahead and you get more wins and successes and projects underway. I'd love to hear how those are going and as the product evolves too. It sounds like a really fascinating set of features for an industry that, frankly, I don't know that much about. So pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll do it. And as soon as we crack the Microsoft Partnership Challenge, I'll come back on and share our victories there as well.
Yeah, our listeners would love to hear it. All right. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSTW podcast. My thanks to Neil for being here. To keep up with Neil's various projects, we'll add some links to the show notes for Superware, Customary, and more. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.